So we're hoping to stretch the reach of our class a little bit farther than the folks that we have today. Though you are all awesome and we love you and we're glad that you're here. We have James Weatherford, who runs 7 Generation Ag. He is a retired Thurston CD district planner. He was someone that we invited over. We invited multiple people from other conservation districts to help us during those 2014, 2015 wildfires. And James was one of those, and just a very skilled planner and a person to have on the ground. And he's gonna do an awesome job of presenting on a rather difficult topic, which you'll find out about in a little bit. We have Joe Lang with us, who is an NRCS engineer who was working with us on the EWP. Tell me what the acronym means again, Craig. Emergency Watershed Protection Program.
Yep, you got it.
Sorry, it's been a while since I've been in that world, and all the acronyms are disappearing out of my head. But but he was one of the EWP engineer who we worked with the most with NRCS. We worked with multiple people from NRCS, but Joe was pretty key, and we worked with him for quite a long time. We have Bob Clark, who's another retired Okanagan Conservation District planner. He worked very closely with Joe on the EWP program, and so we're going to have him talk a little bit about the planning end of that program. Then we also have Bobby Lindemulder. Wave, Bobby. Bobby is the Snohomish Conservation District Manager, and she actually came out and worked on the ground with us also in 2014 and 2015. So, so that's our team, and we're ahead of time already. So actually, I have one more thing to say. Craig sent out a link, I believe it was yesterday, for the OneDrive for the class materials and files. Okay, so there's a place, and there's one place where you can access all the files, presentations, handouts, resources that you can use for later or for looking through as a review for this class, or use them in some emergency that you're experiencing later. We hope to add to that throughout this week, that resource file for you. If you have any questions about those, please let us know, and we'll try to clear that up for you. But definitely be looking in the OneDrive file, because we'll be pulling some of I personally am using one of the handouts from that file in a class, so you're going to want to be able to access those and get to them pretty quickly. Okay, so I just want to give you a little introduction. We're really basing the meat of this course on that experience that we had in 2014 and 2015 with these very large wildfires. Craig, remind me how many acres altogether in those 2 years?
In 2 years, we burned just over 750,000 acres.
Yeah, so it was a rather large job. We have these fabulous teachers. They're going to give you their key takeaways. And I actually am kind of glad that we didn't do this class right away, because we were so down in the weeds on working in it that it's taken a little bit of time for us to pull ourselves out of that day-to-day experience and actually realize what the most important things were that we were doing, because we were doing so many things. And so each of our teachers is going to have some major lessons learned or some key takeaways that they're going to share with you during their classes. If they don't do that, I want you to ask them, okay? Students, I want you to ask your teacher. If you don't hear the key takeaway, or you can't extrapolate that from what they're saying, I want you to ask them a question about it, okay? Like I said before, I think that this class, the tools and the resources and we can't teach you how to be a particular kind of person, but we can teach you some skills. We can give you some exposure to some situations that you may not have thought about before, and practice certain skills. We're going to be applying those to any kind of emergency situation. So Specifically, we have a couple of our teachers who have also worked extensively with flooding, like seasonal flooding, in, you know, on the west side. So we don't deal with that so much here on the east side, but the west side folks will be dealing with flooding. A lot of the things we're going to be talking about will be very applicable to other types of emergency situations. If you don't see a parallel, we may point it out for you. But I want you to be watching for those and let us know when you have an experience that you can say, oh yeah, that exactly, we used that with this other situation. Please bring those things up, because we want to actually make this class as broadly applicable as possible while using wildfire as the example, right? And I will let you know that it's been a bit of a challenge for those of us that were involved in these big fires in 2014 and 2015 to come back to this. We worked our buns off, and we had lots and lots and lots of personal experiences on the ground with landowners, with our own families, and with our own properties that that make it a little bit difficult for us as teachers to go back and try to revisit this, okay? There's a point at which during an emergency, you don't want to think about it anymore. and we went past that point, okay? We are well past that point. And when the opportunity came up to teach this class, my feeling was that's going to be hard for us as teachers, because it impacted us in some very serious ways. But we feel like it's so important that you guys have the tools you need, and to get a little bit of practice ahead of time and a little bit of a sense ahead of time of what that situation might be like, that we're willing to go back to that, okay? We're willing to face that again, because we know how important it is for you guys to be prepared, way more prepared, hopefully, than we were. When these things happen, it's so important that we were willing to do this. And all of us, all 8 or 10 of us that are teaching, feel this way, okay? We were all impacted heavily by that event. And I also want to say at the beginning, we're going to talk about some pretty heavy topics. And it may seem like a big downer, and we're going to throw at you some rather alarming and frightening things sometimes, because we want you to be prepared. We want you in this class in a safe environment to kind of face these things and think about them. But I will tell you right now that this is the most important kind of work as a planner that you will ever do. The work that you do in an emergency situation, regular old work, will, you know, are you really going to remember or think about it 5 years later, or even a year later? I mean, that kind of work, you just do the work, right? It's important in a large sense of the environment being improved. But are you personally going to remember that work a year from now or 5 years from now? I felt like most of the work that I did, I would take pride in driving by and seeing something improved and go, yeah, that was cool. This work, this kind of emergency work after a disaster is different. You will remember the work that you do in these situations more than any other you will ever do in your life. I will guarantee you that you will remember the things that you do during this time more than anything else you will ever do. In my own experience, I learned a lot about what I was capable of that I had no idea I was capable of. I did things and dealt with huge amounts of money. I dealt with huge amounts of data. I dealt with 450 landowners that I personally contacted in one way or another during that time, at least once and usually multiple times. That kind of work, and it changes you, and it changes you forever. And so I hope that when you're taking this class, that you're understanding that there are a lot of bad parts about this. There are a lot of things that are alarming or disturbing about it. but that it's also some of the best work we ever do as human beings, even in the world. And that's, I have been blessed greatly by the chance that I had to work with those landowners and those large wildfires back in 2014, 2015. It changed me. It made me a better person. And so I hope that you'll face this with some cheerfulness that sometimes might seem fleeting, because we are going to talk about some pretty heavy things. But and with that, what I'm going to do is we're going to take a short break. Here's how I want to manage breaks. You're welcome to go use the bathroom. Welcome to stand up, walk around, go get something to eat, get something to drink, whatever you want to do during the break. We're going to do a little bit of an activity at the beginning of each break. And during that time that you're doing your thing, I want you to be thinking about what I proposed, okay? And during the breaks, what we're going to be doing is setting up for this role-playing game we're going to play on Friday, okay? So this is the first break, and what I want to do is introduce that game a little bit. When I was thinking about this, I thought, as I said before, how do we simulate a site visit, right? And we can't. We can't really do an on-the-ground site visit. We wanted to, and because of COVID and because of the formatting of the class, we can't really do it that way. But what we can do is we can run scenarios. And so I thought, well, the only thing I can think of that would be fun and exciting to do would be to play a game. So we're going to play a game similar to Dungeons and Dragons. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Dungeons and Dragons. Basically, what you do is you create a persona for yourself, okay? You decide what kinds of tools and skills and things that persona has, okay? And you then are put into a room with a bunch of other people, and there's a dungeon master. There's a person in charge who tells you what's going on in the scenario around you. Imagine, you have to imagine it. It's not real, but you have to imagine it. And then the dungeon master throws challenges at you, okay? And so your first assignment for the game is to think about the game and to think about who you might be. Pick a persona. So we're going to talk later about different roles, right? And we have people from all different roles in this crowd right now. We have people from different agencies even. But I want you to think about several roles. I want you to think about a district manager or maybe a regional leader, right? That's in charge of managing other people. We have office staff, right? We have some people that need to support that crowd of people. Then we have planners, people that are actually on the ground, okay? And we're actually going to split these rooms up into those different jobs. But I want you to choose one of those jobs, okay, for yourself. I challenge you to pick something that you're not. If you're a planner, pick something else, okay? And get your brain outside of your normal planner mode and become a accounting person in your office or the district manager or somebody else, okay? So go ahead and take your break. We're going to meet back at, let's say 2:40 and take a break, get a drink, use the bathroom, do what you need to do, but be thinking about who you want to be, what kind of role you want to play in the game, okay? Go. Hi, Catherine. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate you coming back promptly. That's awesome. Oops, that's my alarm going off. So we wanted to give you guys a chance to introduce yourselves. I was a little puzzled about how we were actually going to do that without running over each other, but Craig has a brilliant plan. So I'm going to turn the time over to Craig, and he managed that.
All right. Thanks, Terry. The idea that I had was just to go through those who are registered, and if you're here, say hi, introduce yourself to everybody else so we all know who's here and kind of background or kind of the jobs or whatever it is that we do. So they're in relative order. I believe they're pretty much all in order by last name. So you're prepared. So the first one on my list is Matthew Axe.
Hello, this is Matthew Axe from King Conservation District. I'm the Wildfire and Forest Resiliency Coordinator over here in King County, where it's beautiful and sunny today.
Awesome. Thank you, Matthew. Ashley Blazina. She was a hit and miss, may drop in, may drop out kind of person. So.
No, I'm here. Can you hear me?
You're there.
Great. Yeah. Hi, everyone. Ashley Zena, Community Wildfire Preparedness Coordinator with Washington Department of Natural Resources and the Forest Health and Resiliency Division. Based out of Tacoma, Washington, so pretty close to where Matt's coming from as well.
Awesome. All right, cool. Thanks for being here. Okay, Zoe Chu. Okay, Zoe, are you there? All right, I'm going to move on. Bonita Cobb.
My name is Bonita Cobb. I'm with Spokane County Fire District 5 out of Spokane County, which is northwest of Spokane, Washington. I'm also very involved with WASAC, Washington Fire Adaptive Communities, and I help manage 5 different fire-wise communities within Spokane County Fire District 5. And I am a volunteer on the fire department.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you for being here. Okay, Jenny Coe. She was another one that I think was going to kind of bounce in and out. Jenny, you there? All right. How about Trevor? Trevor Contreras.
Hello, I'm Trevor Contreras. I'm a geologist with the DNR. Prior to 2014, we didn't have a landslide hazard program, and it took a lot of people dying around OSO to kind of make the state recognize that they needed a landslide hazard team. So we have 5 of us today. We're trying to build capacity and kind of assist with post-wildfire debris flow evaluations and find ways that we can be helpful. I'm really thankful that you all are putting this on, so then we can kind of learn the perspective of the conservation districts and figure out ways we can assist. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Trevor. All right, Delaney Disher.
Hi, I'm Delaney Disher. I work for the Lincoln County Conservation District. I haven't been with the district very long, but I came on to do grants and finance administration, and I'm now taking over the communications coordinator position, which deals a lot with the Firewise communities and communicating with landowners.
All right. All right. Thank you, Delaney. Okay, how about Lacey Ditto?
Hey, Craig.
Yeah.
Can I just take a minute? If everyone else that's not speaking would turn their mics off, that would be super helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Lacey, are you there? Okay. How about Danny Downs?
Yes, this is Dan. I'm a cattle rancher in Benton County. I'm supervisor with the Benton County Conservation District and also the chair of the Benton County Noxious Weed Board.
Excellent. Well, thank you, sir. Appreciate you being here. Okay, Samantha Frundle. I apologize ahead of time if I butcher anybody's name. Samantha, are you here? Okay, Joy Garaton. Trying to make sure I give everybody plenty of time to be able to find the mute button. If you're not familiar with Teams, it's not exactly, yeah. Okay, Jim Getchman.
Hi, my name is Jim Getchman with the Grays Harbor Conservation District. I am one of the 2 stewardship foresters that work with small forest landowners in Grays Harbor and Pacific counties. So, yeah.
All right, great. Thanks, Jim. Guy Gifford.
I'm Guy Gifford. I'm a forester and coordinate the Firewise Fire Adaptive Community Program for Northeast Region for the Department of Natural Resources. I work out of Spokane. And I got the privilege in 2015 of spending 2 weeks with the Okanagan CD on their bear team assignment as a forester, which is a very interesting learning experience.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that too. All right, Dave Hedrick, you're up, sir.
All right, Dave Hedrick. I'm the district manager of the Ferry Conservation District. Looking forward to learning lots of stuff. Could have used a lot of this information last year. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, we could have used a lot of this information about 7 years ago ourselves. Rodney Height. Okay, all right. Dean Helly.
Yeah, Dean Helly here, Stevens County Conservation District. Had a brief brush with this back in 2015 when we lost a little over 100,000 acres. So here to learn more and go from there.
All right, thanks, Dean. Margaret Creeder.
It's Creeder. Hi, I'm Margaret Creeder. I'm a forester with the Puget Sound Conservation Caucus based in Mason County.
All right. Great. Thanks, Margaret. Rachel Little.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rachel Little. I work for Benton Conservation District. I'm the Outreach and Education Coordinator, looking to learn more about how we might serve our residents in our county.
All right. Thanks, Rachel. Marilyn Lohman. Okay. Hillary Lundgren. I think some people are maybe being bashful. Okay, how about Mark Mead?
Hi, I'm Mark Mead. I'm the stewardship forester out here at Mason County, or Mason Conservation District, sorry.
Excellent. All right, thanks, Mark. Chuck Messenger. All right. Connor Nicola.
Hey everyone, my name's Connor Nicola. I'm from Lincoln County Conservation District. I'm the natural resource planner there in Davenport and going to be stepping in and taking up some of the Firewise community stuff we have as well.
Awesome. All right, thanks for joining us. Charlie Peterson. Okay, Emily Richard.
Hi, I'm Emily Richard. I'm a geologist with the Washington Geological Survey. I work with Trevor Contreras on his WALERT team, which is Wildfire Associated Landslides Emergency Response Team. And I'm looking forward to learning more from you guys.
All right, thanks for joining us, Emily. Annie Schmidt.
Hi, everyone. My name is Annie Schmidt. I work for the National Fire Adapted Communities Learning Network. I also have the great pleasure of living in Leavenworth and have spent a fair amount of my time here in North Central Washington. I'm here to learn from all of you and to see what lessons may be replicable at a nationwide level and just enjoy always getting a chance to come home and learn and be with people at home. So it's great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Annie. And right here, right now, all the credit's going to go to Annie, because a lot of what we learned at the height of 2014 was phone conversations I had with and others had with Annie. So this is full circle for Annie. So we might lean on her a little bit as we go through this too. So she's had more than her fair share of experiences for sure. So thanks for being here, Annie. All right, Jessica Walston.
Hi, I work for the Washington State DNR as a landowner assistant cost share program specialist, and I just help landowners do fuels reduction work on their property, and I'm excited to learn some things.
All right, great. Thank you. Amanda Ward.
Hi, everyone. Amanda Ward, District Manager for Foster Creek Conservation District.
All right. Thanks, Amanda. Katie Zander.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Katie Zander. I'm a landowner assistance forester based out of East Wenatchee, and I cover Chelan, Douglas, and the northern part of Grant County, and I sign folks up to help them receive some cost share money.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, now we're going to cycle back into the 2 or 3 that got added later in the day or later in the week last week. Kelsey Madsen.
Hello, my name is Kelsey. I work for FEMA, and after the Oregon 2020 wildfires, I was the FEMA co-lead for the ETART assessment, and that is Erosion Threat Assessment and Reduction Team. Thanks.
Excellent. Thanks for being here, Kelsey. Sharon Frazee. Okay. And last but not least, Mike Baden.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mike Baden. I'm with the Washington State Conservation Commission. I'm the North Central and Northeast Regional Manager for the Commission, but also I'm kind of the overall project manager for the FEMA grant that is funding this training, as well as a number of others through the State Emergency Management Department. So the Commission received a grant to put on a number of these trainings that really glad to see folks participating in. I'm really thankful to the Okanagan Conservation District for helping put this together, and for the speakers that are going to speak this week. And just really glad for all the folks that are attending and all of the partners that are attending. I hope it's really valuable. We're really excited to have this, something different. When we were putting this together, we felt it could be really relevant training that we don't see at all. That is really unique opportunity to be able to put on. So thanks everyone for participating, and I hope you really find it valuable over the next few days. And if I have time, if there's time somewhere along the line, I can share a little bit more about some of the other trainings that are part of this as well, that folks might want to or have already participated in. But again, today, just thanks so much. Really appreciate you all.
All right, great. Thank you. Okay, did I miss anybody else? Somebody that I didn't call upon. Okay, Terry.
Well, we thank you guys so much for attending, and we've got such a broad range of experiences in this crowd. I am so excited that you're all getting to meet each other and connect with each other, and I hope that we have a chance later to talk and chat and in a more casual setting. But I think that this actually was working really well. As long as we keep our cameras on, I'm feeling like we can see you. And I've been very happy to actually meet you and welcome you to this class. So we're going to start. We're kind of working through this in a particular direction, starting with something happens, some big, humongous thing happens, and then what? What do you do as a conservation district? What do you do? How do you decide what you're going to do? Where do you go from there? And so the expert on that topic is actually Craig Nelson of the Okanagan Conservation District, and he's going to be our first speaker. He's going to talk about that particular what do we do now moment. Go ahead, Craig.
Thanks, Terry. I don't know about expert. I've done it a few times, and so far, knock on wood, I haven't royally screwed it up, at least in most people's eyes, I think. So, yeah. So, what do you do? I'll very quickly set the stage of kind of where we were at in 2014. We had just hosted ironically, the Conservation Commission in Okanagan for their regular meeting in July. There'd been a couple of small fires, 4 specifically, in the Methow Valley that had started from a lightning storm a few days previous. And they had, by all intents and purposes, kind of sat and smoldered. And as part of the commission meeting, we hosted them on a tour of project sites. And we actually took them to one project site in kind of at the transition into forest from shrub steppe. Landowner there that they'd been very instrumental in implementing Firewise practices around their home as part of that tour. Very nice couple. They lived kind of semi off the grid. They didn't have I don't see, what was it? They had telephone but not power, or vice versa. I can't remember. Anyways, they were right at the edge, if you will. And the next day, the commission had their meeting, and that's when the cold front blew in, and it pushed 4 fires essentially together. And on that Thursday afternoon, afternoon and evening, the fire went from 4 small individual fires of each less than about 1,500 acres, as I recall. And by Friday morning, it was approximately 165,000 acres had burned. It was a massive fire that happened very quickly. And so, the first thing first is, take care of yourself, take care of, your own needs, take care of your family's needs. My mom happens to live within that, or lived at the time within where the fire burned. And so she evacuated to my house. And so I had to deal with her. So that first day after the major things, major fire happened, I'm dealing with family and through that weekend. And so then by the time Monday rolled around, it was time to, come to work. And it was myself and Terry and 4 other employees total. We had 6 employees at the district at the time. And we sat down kind of talking about, if you will, war stories. But, we kind of had that, what do we do now, and the first thing that really occurred to us was, well, what really has happened? Because at that point, most of what we knew was what we'd learned off of Facebook, which you can pretty much guarantee is about 90% false and 10% made up. So you just never trust anything that you might see there. And so, we were really focused on trying to get some idea of, what exactly has occurred. But then start having a kind of conversation about, what can we do to help? What do we offer that maybe somebody else doesn't? Because we knew that there was a lot of organizations and agencies that would be mobilized to obviously, you have Forest Service and DNR and local fire districts and many other agencies that are working on battling the flames. But we also knew from prior experience with much smaller fires that there would be a post-fire risk, and there would be post-fire situations that we would need to potentially help people with and educate landowners. We'd had large fires in Okanagan County prior to this, but most of them had occurred up on Forest Service lands, far outside of where people lived. Now we had many people dealing with the after effects of fire, and what does that mean for them? And so we had that conversation amongst the staff, and one of the things that we quickly decided was that whatever we commit to, we have to be committed to at least that much. We can always add more things that we'll offer to help with, but we can't back away. And so I've taken in the years since to calling that first meeting, that Monday morning, to what I call the Yoda meeting. For those of you that are Star Wars aficionados, it's the do or do not, there is no try. So we had to decide what we were going to do and what we were not going to do, because if we only did it part way or only for a little bit, that was really unfair to a lot of people. So we had to have that conversation, and that's, I think, one of the most pivotal times, in any emergency, is trying to decide, what are within our capabilities, what can we do? You know, we had Terry, who was a great planner. She really knew the ins and outs of doing conservation planning and knowing a lot of the tools and resources that are available in that respect. We had Leslie Michael, who's a soil scientist. You know, she really knew what the impacts, you know, of fire could be on soils, and what she didn't know, she was confident she could learn quickly. You know, we had an outreach specialist, so we had somebody that could go out and talk to the community and talk to the public and tell them, you know, worry about this, don't worry about that. You know, we just had to get the right information to her to be able to relay to the public. You know, and we had you know, other you know, seasoned professionals, if you will, that had other specialties that we knew that we could put to use. So you know, it was really about, you know, identifying what the problem is and you know, what we can do about it, and then staying true to that and living within that realm of, you know, what you're capable of. One of the things that I'm very thankful for is I was contacted by another conservation district manager offering to help, and I was like, well, I can't, you know, I don't have money to pay for this and everything else, and she said, well, you need to talk to the folks at the Conservation Commission to see if they can help, you know. And so so you know, you have to be willing to reach out too. You know, at that point I was so focused on just what I and 5 other employees could do, and with almost no resources, and so that really kind of opened my eyes up to the idea that this is not, it's not an internal thing. There's no shame in asking for help, for asking for resources. You know, start calling in every favor you can dream of ever having had, and start making phone calls. And so as a result of that, we were able to bring in other staff like James and Bobby and many others to come in and help us deal with that. We brought in staff to just come in and help us answer the phones, because the phones were ringing just constantly. We weren't able to get anything else done. You know, and so we just started working through that, you know, and we started working with, you know, our local emergency management and stuff like that, you know, which I'll get into in a minute, but, you know, really trying to define exactly what it is that we can handle. And that's going to be different for every organization, whether you're a conservation district or a private nonprofit or whatever else, your capabilities are going to be different. So really kind of, you know, looking at that kind of stuff, you know, and finding, you know, find those other outside resources, you know, and I'll get to it in a minute, you know, again, but, you know, just we had meetings with other resource groups, you know, what could they do? And, you know, there's a little bit of it that we kind of said, okay, well, this particular sub-watershed, you guys have a lot of landowner contacts and everything else. You guys work there, just feed us the information of what the losses are so that we can feed them up the line to state emergency management and others. So some of it is geographic, some of it is based on specialties. There's almost always a place to put offers of assistance. So keep that in mind. And you do just need somebody just kind of sitting back and being somewhat of a ringleader. You know, they've got to be able to be available for phone calls that happen at the last minute, and they got to be available to kind of coordinate and see who's doing what and where are people going and what are they doing next and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, be conscious of that. You can't get so lost in the details of doing the things that you forget what the big picture is. So, the next thing was, you know, the media, you know, and this is where we really leaned on people like Annie Schmidt and folks at the Kittitas Conservation District who had dealt with, you know, more recent wildfires. The Chelan County, the Natural Resource Conservation Service office staff there, Amy Hendershot, she had dealt with some fires around the Wenatchee area, and you know, just getting information, you know, give us flyers that we can unabashedly copy and paste and send to anybody and everybody that will take them. You know, and start getting that word out. And so making contacts with local media and started providing that stuff. And you know, pretty soon you become the expert because you're the first person to provide them this information. And it's like, we're not the experts, but you know, okay, you know, but we can help people kind of disseminate what some of this stuff means. You know, things like, what are hazard trees? You know, when does a tree go from being the majestic, beautiful thing that's been over my deck or over my driveway, and now is suddenly a you know, a hazard, is going to be a risk to me or my family, you know, and start getting some of those messages out. We also used the grapevines, just the local, contact people, who's who, and what are, who can help us get the word out. Use those types of avenues. We of course use social media. I mean, if Facebook was great for telling everybody what was going on with the fire, we could also use it to tell people what they could do now, and what they shouldn't do now. And then also using other community organizations. We were not afraid to go to cattlemen's meetings or other organizational meetings and say, okay, here's what we know, here's what we can help you with, here's some information you can use. So then the other one was talking with emergency management. So we had many meetings with our local emergency management. They have emergency management meetings that kick off with disasters, and we just started showing up. We were one of the few people in the room that didn't have the special little necklace thing that had little cards under there. We didn't care. We just stood there. They didn't kick us out as long as they weren't kicking us out, and we weren't being too nosy or anything else. They tolerated us, and by the time we got to the end, we still didn't get the little name tags, but at least they were asking us questions and we were giving them data. So that was good. We also went to a lot of Annie probably knows what the name is, but there's what I call fire camp meetings. This is where the folks that are in charge of dealing with fire. We had type 1 teams. These are teams that are from like Southern California and from Colorado and other places, and they would come in and they would host a public meeting and say, this is where the fire is at, this is what we're doing to fight it, etc. And we learned early on that if we got in with them and with their public information officer, we could usually get about 5 minutes to talk about post-fire stuff. They don't really want to talk about that at those meetings. I'm going to tell you that right now. They don't want that. They are really focused on what is in the here and now. What are we doing? What was done today? What's planned for tomorrow? And that's it. That's all they want to talk about. But we were able to get a little bit of time with people and give them kind of a heads up and begin to tell them what resources were available. So use those types of opportunities. The emergency management also set up what they call trap lines, which are oftentimes little sandwich boards that they set out at local grocery stores, community halls, things like that, where people might be able to stop by and they staple the, where the fire zone maps are and all that kind of stuff. Excuse me, we found that we were allowed to also put some of our stuff up there. So we started putting things up there about, some of the post-wildfire risks and stuff like that, and it was about that time that we got connected in with people like Catherine Rowden from the National Weather Service saying, hey, watch out for post-wildfire flooding. And we thought she was losing it. And then she pointed out what exactly it all meant. And then we started getting really serious about it and started telling people about it and the risks, thankfully, about a week before it actually occurred. So, use all of those resources to start getting the word out. That's probably one of the biggest things that you need to do is just start getting the word out to people of what they need to be concerned with. And some folks will be worried immediately about weeds, or they'll be concerned about, a lot of things that really aren't emergent needs, and they won't be talking about the things that really are. So helping your community kind of focus on what's important right at the moment is really important. And then I'll just kind of wrap up real quick, as far as like some of the local emergency management, having conversations with emergency management about, what you're planning to do and everything else and what's going on and everything else is really important, because they're responsible for, what's going on, obviously near the fire and everything else. But also they're getting contacted frequently by state and federal resources about, what's going on and things like that. And all the information you can provide to them about what you're learning is really important. So make sure that you have kind of a good working relationship with them and understand kind of what your responsibilities and their responsibilities are. In 14, we made the mistake of talking to them and saying, we'd like to go talk to ag producers who we work with very frequently and find out what their losses are. And emergency management told us to come back the next day and they'll talk to us about it. We went back the next day and the emergency management director just looked at us and said, you're responsible for all ag and natural resource recovery, and turned around and walked away. And we kind of went, oh my God, that was not what we were expecting. That's not what we were signing up for, but it sounds like we've just been voluntold. And so, we started to really kick it into high gear at that point. So understand what your roles and responsibilities are, and then finally, like I said, get those partner meetings set up. Talk to there's plenty of nonprofits out there. There's other agencies that are not necessarily involved with direct firefighting activities, but they have natural resource backgrounds, and they might be able to provide some assistance. We included like our local fish and wildlife habitat biologists in some of those meetings, and started talking about, okay, when landowners start calling up and worried about, debris stacking up against their culverts or in their yards or whatever, what do they need to do for permits? And they're like, well, just have them give us a call and we'll expedite the permits and things like that. And having them there at those meetings really helped to kind of open their eyes up to what the demand was going to be. And I think that it helped really expedite a lot of those processes. And they could also then be there to kind of give people the kind of heads up of other things they need to be looking out for. So with that, I'm happy to answer questions or hand it back over to Terry. It's your choice, Terry.
Well, I think that I'm actually going to have you guys hold your questions. You might write them down if you have any questions. I'd like to give James enough time to speak. Annie made some great comments in the chat box, so please check those out in the chat box. One thing I do want to kind of say about what Craig was talking about is if you can develop those relationships now before there's a huge emergency, that is a great asset when you go to the time when you really need them. If you haven't developed those relationships before, that's a problem. If you're trying to do it in the heat of the moment, that's a problem. So please be trying to create or strengthen those relationships before the event actually happens.
Yeah, so I'll real quickly add to that. If you've got very good contacts with your local emergency management director, they can often help get you in for those cooperator meetings with the fire teams. So
absolutely. Our next speaker is James Weatherford. And take it away, James. You're awesome.
Well, thanks, Terry. I'm not entirely certain about that, but so to give you a little bit brief background on myself, I'm 5th generation dryland wheat and cattle in Eastern Oregon, where I grew up, and over the years I've experienced floods and fires and stuff. Just a natural course of events throughout my life. And I lived in an area where fire was all hands on deck. Everybody went to fight the fire no matter what was going on. Since then, they've become more of a professional firefighter department, but that's what it was when I was growing up. And also, in one of the younger iterations of myself, I spent a couple of years fighting wildfires in California for CDF. So I had that experience. I've seen fires. I've seen some bigger fires, and some small ones, and I've seen some that acted crazy and did things that fire isn't supposed to do. So when this 2014 fire happened, I wasn't really paying that much attention to it till Craig called me up one day and asked me if I would come help. And I said, well, when do you want me? And he says, today. And it actually took a couple of days to get the paperwork done, but I was on my way. I was a little hesitant at first, but it was a great learning experience for me. Now, Terry assigned me to the brain fart. Twist area, and the river runs along there, and I had enough fire experience where I could drive up that road up along the river and look at both sides of the canyon and see the burn, and I could see it was such a big area. I could see just driving along what the fire had done, where it moved fast, where it settled down and burned hot. And I realized quickly that the fires that I had always thought of as being big fires were not. This was a big fire. You know, in fact, I spent better part of 2 weeks that year pretty much in the black, dealing with landowners. I was doing landowner assistance, fire damage assessments, risk analysis. You know, and as a fire, like Craig mentioned, you know, as a firefighter, I was concerned with one thing: putting a fire out. You know, actually, I was more concerned with where's the fire and where am I in relationship to it. But that was the focus: putting fires out, not what's going to happen next, not who's losing what. But that's what I ended up being on this in this deal, and I will tell you, it will have an impact on you. You know, a pretty heavy one. You know, just the actual devastation of it all was a little overwhelming. At first, I couldn't get my head around it, but the more time I spent there, the more it impacted me. The harder it was to deal with because it was so complete. There was no rhyme or reason for anything. Fire burned where it shouldn't have and didn't burn where it should have, and people lost things, and that whole, just the sheer devastation had a negative impact, had a big impact, and took a while to learn how to deal with that. And I will tell you that growing up where I did, a lot of the people that I came in contact with, although I didn't know them personally, they were my people. They were the people that I grew up around, you know, dry land, rangeland ranchers and wheat farmers, and the same attitudes, the same wants and desires, the same needs. Those were my people. So I don't know if that was a help or a hindrance for me. It maybe made things a little more personal for me, you know, which can be a good thing, you know, in dealing with those folks. But I can tell you that with the impact that it had on me, as bad as it was nothing compared to the impact that it was having on the people that were living it. You know, at the end of the day, I was going to go home at some point and go back to my life, and nothing really would have changed much. That's not the case for these people that I was dealing with, you know, and their damages and their losses varied, of course, but I don't think that the impact that it had on their psyche and their lives varied much. You know, if you lose everything you have, you've lost everything you have, whether that's a lot or a little. You know, and some of these people had lost everything, and some of them had a real hard time getting their heads around it, and you could see in their eyes and on their faces that they were in absolute shock. You know, it was traumatic for them. It was traumatic for me just being there, but it was really traumatic for them to have lost, in many cases, not only their homes, but their entire livelihood, you know, and what represented their savings. It was difficult for them. And I found that the hardest thing for me to do was to help them begin to sort it out and get it into priorities. You know, with them, it was the entirety of the total loss was what they saw, and they couldn't begin to make heads or tails of it. They couldn't begin to figure out what they needed to worry about and what they didn't need to worry about. You know, what was not going to be important for them to be concerned about. So what I would do was just talk to them and listen to them, That's I found to be the most important thing, because some people, there isn't much you can do for them except listen, and hopefully come up with some kind of a plan with them, without giving them any BS platitudes, you know, because I can tell you right now, people in that situation don't want to hear a bunch of crap. They got enough stuff on their mind. They don't need nonsense, you know. For instance, a lot of the rangeland ranchers I dealt with, you know, they lost all their feed, they lost all their rangeland, they lost all their fences, lost a goodly portion, if not all, of their livestock, and it just looked like there was nothing left, you know. But in most cases, not all, but in most cases, the rangeland itself was going to survive. You know, the grasses, with the exception of a few species like Idaho fescue, were going to survive and thrive just fine. They're going to come back after the fire as soon as it started raining, which is what happened. You know, so that narrowed it down a little bit. At least that's one thing off their plate they don't have to worry about. You know, they might have lost their house. Finding a place to live, getting a house in, that's a doable thing. It's a pain, but it's doable. You can manage that, and so can building fences. You know, there ended up being some people that got together and took groups up and built an awful lot of fence for some of those guys. You know, one of them, my colleague Dave Nygaard, his group, they built an awful lot of fence, and good on them for it. Give you an idea of where some of the folks were. That first year I met one guy that was 78 years old, and we were standing and looking at his place, and he was showing me he had this nice looking meadow that didn't appear to be touched, but across the meadow was a hillside that was all heavily timbered with merchantable timber, and it was all standing dead. It was completely burned out, and he explained to me that timber represented the entirety of his retirement. That was his savings, his life savings, and it was all gone, you know. And to top it off, there was a cabin on that place that he had been renting out, generate a few dollars of cash income. But they thought they had saved that cabin, but what happened was the fire got into the underground utility lines going from a creek that shouldn't have burned, but did, and went all the way up through those lines and got into that house and burned it to the ground. Now, listening to the landowner here is where it becomes key, because you have to learn to listen to not only what they do say, but what they don't. You know, this poor guy, 78 years old, and he had an absolute look of being totally lost in his eyes, you know, and he says, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do now. And unfortunately, I didn't have a good answer for him. But what I realized was that cabin, not only that timber being his security, his life savings, but that cabin didn't represent to him so much a small amount of cash income every month in rent. What that cabin represented to him was his safety net. Whatever else might happen, he had a place to live that was paid for, and that was gone. So he didn't even have that anymore, you know. And I remember that poor guy like it was yesterday, and there were a few others like him. But that's the kind of trauma that you run into doing this kind of work. You know, it's hard not to feel that. you know, and see that and feel that. It can be absolutely devastating to people. Another thing that I will say that happened to me, and I don't know if about other people, but spending so much time, and let me stop here for a second. I apologize, I'm going to kind of jump around here a little bit, apparently. I thought I had it all lined out in my head, but doing this kind of brings it back, and it didn't happen like that for me. You know, it happened in disjointed pieces along the way. But after all that was over, especially after 2015, when I worked on the bear team, spent all my time in the black, there seemed to be a dissonance between what my brain was seeing and what it expected to see. You know, where they were supposed to be colored, there was black and gray. And when I left there and finally did see color after a couple of weeks, it seemed strange for some reason. It didn't seem normal because I was so used to looking at black. And I'd never spent that much time in the black in my life, even fighting fires. You know, it was a whole different thing compared to fighting fires. It wasn't the same animal at all. But I don't know how best to handle it. I do know, that Annie Schmidt there is an expert at this. So I'm going to take the liberty of putting her out there as a resource. But also, you know, working with people, you need to be able to give them some kind of hope. If at all possible, and that is that maybe something so small as the range will come back, you know, on its own, or this much of the range will. This little piece over here, you're going to have to replant, but, you know, and then come up with some action they think they can do. You know, you're going to have to rebuild your fences. We know this. You know, you're going to have to plant this area over here that was old growth sagebrush and didn't have any grass in it really. Now the sagebrush is all gone. So you have an action and a plan, and it kind of helps them to settle their mind a little bit. Now, one more little example I want to give you about this is I went out and I spent actually a full day with one young couple that were the husband paraplegic, and he was confined to a motorized scooter, and they're rangeland ranchers, and his wife was a little bitty thing, and they weren't worried so much about the fences. You know, that wasn't something they were concerned about. They weren't worried about the rangeland so much. That wasn't something they were worried about. Other than they didn't know how much of it was totally lost. So we went out and we spent several hours assessing that range, and most of it was in pretty good shape. You know, but one thing they said when we first got there was they were concerned about a culvert across the creek that their driveway ran across, and they were really concerned about it. And I didn't understand why, because it didn't seem to be that big of a deal. You know, we talked about the flood waters that were likely to come down, you know, and that culvert may wash out, and they were concerned about it, as they put it, because their kids got caught on the wrong side of it one time when it washed out, and they couldn't get them home, you know, so they had to go stay with relatives for a few days. Well, okay, that's kind of a big deal, but that's not a big enough deal to justify how worried they were about it. You know, so to get back to listening to what they don't say. You know, fact is, her husband several times a year would have complications and need to go to the hospital right now. in an emergency situation. And if that culvert was washed out, they wouldn't be able to get him out. That's not something they came right out and spoke about. Probably didn't want to even contemplate it. But that's what the real issue was. That's what we were most concerned about, was that culvert being washed out and not being able to get out. It was such a big deal to them, they couldn't see the easy fix, which was to put a gate in the fence and go out the other way. They could just cut a road across the range pasture that had burned out, and not a problem. You know, when I mentioned that solution to them, everything else just melted away and became instantly doable for them. You know, it made that big a difference, and that tells you how much this stuff was impacting their thought processes, and they were so focused on that problem they couldn't see past it. You know, and personally, I think that little thing there was the best accomplishment I had over the whole year of all the work that I did there. That made the biggest difference in somebody's life. You know, most of it, not a big deal. I'm running late, but I want to bring up one more little thing. The first year I was there doing the landowner work, I got really friendly with one couple, and we became pretty good friends and stayed in contact and traded books back and forth a little bit and stuff. So when I was there in 2015, I wanted to go visit them. They were in the Carlton complex up the Met Howe, and I wanted to go spend some time, visit with them, because I expected that you know, the rains came back just fine as soon as it started raining, and they got their fence up and everything was looking up. You know, things were doing great. But that isn't what happened. So what had happened was they didn't have rangeland that year for their cattle, so they leased some up north. And in 2014, they lost half their cattle. And in 2015, they moved the other half up north a ways to some rented rangeland. And when that burned, they lost those cows too. And that was like a kick in the gut for me. It really was. And I can't imagine what it was like for them living it. But that's the kind of stuff that you can expect to deal with doing this kind of work. You know, floods are no different. You know, when I was working on the Chehalis flood, met one landowner that had 90 head of sheep that all crowded into the barn when the waters came up. And seeing as how sheep don't float worth a hoot, he ended up, he had 90 dead sheep. You know, so the negative things, you got to take your wins where you can find them. You know, helping somebody find a different way to get out of their house. You know, it seems like a little thing, but it was a big win to me at the time. And I hope none of us ever has to do anything like that again, but my feeling is this is going to become more common, not less. Well, welcome to the world of wildfires. Thanks.
Thank you, James. I want James to speak at the beginning of this training session, because what I found in working with wildfire recovery was that the normal course of business was not the most important work we did. That the conservation planning, the site assessments, the helicopter seeding, the outreach programs that we did, those were not the key. The key was what James was just talking about, that our work with the landowners was very meaningful on a very deep basis, We were someone that was there to listen to them, each one of them, not as a group, not in an announcement in a big room full of people, but one by one, we were talking with those landowners and listening to them. And since that time, I've realized that work, that emotional work that we were able to do with the landowners was actually the most important thing we ever did in that wildfire recovery work that we were doing. It didn't have to do with, most of the time, the resource conservation. It had to do with that one-on-one human work that we did with the landowners. And sometimes we're personally impacted enough, or that we've heard enough stories, or that we're struggling to kind of maintain our own sanity in the midst of all that, that it's difficult for us to put ourselves in the position of those landowners. But thank you, James. That was a beautiful way to really understand what was going through the minds of some of those landowners. We're going to talk a lot more about that as we go along. We are going to take a short break. I definitely want, if you guys would like to stay during the break and actually do some talking and not just sit there, you're welcome to have small conversations about the topics that we've covered, about the lessons that you've heard, ask questions of other people in the group, or, talk about the kinds of activities that we're going to be doing on Friday to work, talk amongst yourselves about the activity on Friday and who's doing what and that kind of thing. It'd be really great if you guys could get to know each other a little bit better and spend some time learning from each other. So it is now 3:36. We are going to take about let's say go to 3:45. It'll be a little shorter break this time, but go ahead and take your break, walk around, get some blood moving, go outside and enjoy the sunshine, and we'll come back. Thank you so much, James. There are some great thank yous in the chat box for you there, so you might check those out. And we'll see you back here at 3:45.
Hey, Terry. Thanks for putting on the show. I appreciate it. I was curious, did you say you wanted the cameras on or you wanted them off?
I prefer if you have them on.
Okay.
If possible, and you've got the bandwidth for it, please turn your cameras on.
Okay.
It's so much easier for us to gauge whether you're falling asleep or not.
Yeah.
Or falling over in your chair, or raptly listening to the teacher. It's very much easier for the teachers if they can see some kind of response from the people that they're teaching. It helps us do a better job. So if it's possible for you to turn your cameras on during the class, that would be awesome.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I was starting to think maybe I heard wrong. I need to. So okay, perfect.
Now,
Thanks for
we
clarifying.
have some folks with specific situations in which they can't, and we excuse them, but we really would prefer it if you have the bandwidth to go ahead and keep your cameras on. Not during the breaks necessarily, but in general, during the talking parts. Does anybody have any questions while James is here? He won't be with us tomorrow, so if you've got questions for James, this might be a good time for that.
So James, it sounds like you work both sides of the Cascades and are up from Oregon. Where are you based out of now? Mason County, or?
No, actually I live on the edge of Thurston County, almost Mason.
Okay. Oh, good deal.
I've been here actually about 20 years now. I worked for Thurston Conservation District for 14. And now I work on my own a little bit independently. No particular reason, I just do. For one thing, I can't leave it behind,
Yeah, right. Hard to stop.
Yeah. Well, I said I'm fifth generation, and I'm fifth generation on the same land in Oregon, and we now have the seventh generation hitting the ground, which is where the 7 generations come from. but you don't get that without having a lot of conservation-minded focus drilled into you from a very young age.
Yeah. Well, whereabouts in Oregon are you from?
Gillum County, south of Arlington, between Arlington and Condon.
Okay. Oh, okay, great. I grew up down the Willamette Valley there, out between Sheridan and McMinnville. So.
Yeah, there's a bunch of Weatherfords there too.
Yep. Oh, okay.
How you doing, Trevor?
Good.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you. I was like, I think that's the Annie I met in Wenatchee a couple of years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Same one.
Oh, cool.
Like a bad penny. Just keep hanging around.
Good. You get a little what do you call it? Patina on you when
right?
Around a while, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, did you work for DNR for a while, or?
I did, yeah. So I worked for DNR on the 2561 report to the legislature. So I was brought in just to do a project work, and it was great. I enjoyed it. It was kind of a nice follow-on. I had helped put together the strategic plan. I was on the team that helped do the wildland fire strategic plan, and so it was just a nice tie-in. And when that project finished up, I went back to fire adapted community stuff. So
excellent. Yeah. Oh, cool. Well, thank you so much for kind of helping DNR see the fire light. I feel like the culture is changing due to some of that strategic plan work. There are so many new fire scientists and ecologists at the agency, whereas before I was not aware of them. But maybe it's also that we're that we're more aware of it. That we're kind of getting in the arena of debris flow work.
Oh yeah,
you know,
it is, and that was, I think that for me, that was one of the goals in the planning process, was just to create some space for some of the things that we knew had to happen and needed to happen, and especially around the post-fire work. And that's been really exciting to see that element of the strategic plan really move forward in a way that, I don't know that it's necessarily due to the plan, but it's certainly supported by the plan, or like the plan has supported its acceleration. And so that's just been really great. Because, you hate to do these things and have them sit around and no one reads them, which is where I think like no one's reading that plan either. Don't get me wrong, but people are selectively pulling out pieces and applying them. Like I was reading the fiscal note for 1168 the other day, and the plan was cited in there with respect to some of the post-fire work. And so it's just really exciting to see some of that actually get used.
Fun to read parts that I felt like it was a different voice of the agency that I hadn't heard before. So
cool. That's good. That's good.
Okay.
And you guys, you say you had 4 or 5 now you've brought into your shop, so you guys are expanding a bit.
Yeah, we have kind of 5 full-time geologists. Mostly we're mapping county by county landslides, but then when the fires start firing up, I think all of us are going to be red carded this year. I think we had one new person that we hired kind of mid-COVID Emily is here today, Richard. She's getting trained up this year, so she can come out with us too. But she
That's
came
great.
out last year. It was just on the when the fires had dwindled down and we're no longer kind of under IC. So.
And what are the quals you guys are going to be packing on your red cards?
This year we're reefs, so resource advisors, fireland rated. Yeah. I think in the past we were technical specialist bear team or technical specialist geologist. And Steve, I don't know, did you work with Stephen Slaughter?
Yeah.
Some of this? Okay. So he he was in charge of our landslide hazard program, and then kind of got a few of us into it as we've built up, and then he went off to the feds. And kind of doing landslide work at an international level, but he kind of built our capacity up and introduced us to the various players and kind of helped us get our footing, I guess. So it's neat work.
I think we're gonna all be busy this summer in North Central Washington. I am starting to get real itchy about it, actually. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, and then thinking about the fire scars from the previous year or two, it's going to happen when they get a lot of rain. So.
Yep. Indeed. I know it's funny who folks are kind of in that place right now where you can start to see the season shaping up and there's just like not enough data points. So I feel like it's the magic 8 ball, which is, we're at the point in the season where like ask again later, the future is unclear, like I definitely feel that's the point of the fire season in which we are currently residing. So we'll see what the next month brings.
Yeah, for sure.
I love the predictions of, well, we've had a dry March, so we're going to have, the worst fire season in history. And I'll never forget attending. It was actually a presentation by National Weather Service in January of 2015. And they were talking about, it was put on by, it was organized actually by Representative Joel Kretz. And they had National Weather Service people. They had all sorts of specialists. There was 150 people jam-packed in the Brewster High School library. I don't know how they put that many people in there. I'm sure we were a violation of a fire code somewhere. But anyways, it was a climatologist from the National Weather Service, and he showed the data for the 10 worst fires to that date. It excluded 2014, albeit because that was just too soon, but it was like up through like 2012, I want to say. The 10 worst fires in the state of Washington, 6 of which happened during drought years, 3 of which happened during above average precipitation years, and 1 was an average precip year. Something like it was right around there. So yes, drought years tend to have worse fires, but it's not an exclusive domain of drought years. So yeah, it's you just never know. I mean, it's those fire fuels, when they dry out, and then do you have the ignition source, yes or no? And I mean, like we saw last summer, I mean, we were getting through without any major glitches, and then Labor Day weekend happened, and it was eerily similar to the Carlton complex. It was a cold front coming in, there was a spark, and that's all she wrote. So yeah, I mean, you take any one of those elements out and you don't have it. It just doesn't happen. So
when I was fighting fires, Craig, for a living, we always figured that a wet spring equals abundant flash fuel.
Yep.
Yep, that's kind of what we found for sure. Well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate y'all coming back. That's awesome. I like it when my class doesn't disappear. So, Anya, good job. We actually have a really awesome speaker coming up. Her name is Bobby Lindemulder. Sorry. Yeah. The technical difficulties. We were hoping to avoid lots of technical difficulties, but I'm sure that they will crop up here and there. But Bobby's going to be speaking about a couple of different things. Right now, we're sort of talking about how do you prepare yourself and how do you prepare your team to go and do those assessments. And so Bobby's going to talk a little bit about personal and site safety, and then she's going to tackle a couple of the SWAPAHEAT topics, plants and animals, which are 2 of the biggest ones. So Bobby's going to take over here, and we'll give her the floor. And she's going to speak for quite a while. And then after Bobby's done, we'll have about a half an hour for questions and answers and general just discussion and review. So go ahead, Bobby. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks. You can see everything there and hear me okay. We'll be good to go. Awesome. So yeah, my name is Bobby Lindemulder. I'm the Ag Program Director for the Snohomish Conservation District. Just a little background. I've been there, it'll be my 24th year as a planner at the Snohomish CD. Before that, my history was with the Forest Service as a range con and wildlife tech before when it first started. And I actually went through all the 94 fires in Chelan, India and Leavenworth on district. And I really was interested in coming over and helping Okanagan. One, because it's what districts do, is we step up and help each other where we can. But it was also, I couldn't imagine, I mean, 94 fires were big, and I couldn't imagine the workload that they were going to be dealing with there on private land. You know, the previous work I did was, the majority of it was in Forest Service lands. And so I jumped at the chance, and most of my history and background, of course, is in range and grazing management, but just planning and working with landowners, developing those relationships, following the NRCS protocols and planning standards, dealing with the all the SWAPA-E and all of the planning and the tools. And one of the things that you just don't understand is there's not a tool that you're going to pull out of your pocket and like fill out and be able to give somebody an answer once you go out to these sites. So anyway, I was really happy to go and help and experience this with them, because I knew, one, it was going to be a great learning experience. It's awesome for you to go, and it's a great learning from a fire hose experience. But like it's been said before, is some of the best experiences and worst experiences is working through a disaster, you know, and you really learn as you go. But, you know, with all of that, we have to keep safety in mind. And so we're going to have a short little presentation on site safety and PPE and things to consider, because you may be going into an area you've never experienced, or a side of a climate of part of the world where you don't often work. There's hazards that you wouldn't think about. And so I just kind of was thinking about, you know, if I was, you know, a district person, and I was familiar with the majority of what was going on, but I know that there's a lot of people that are going to be dumped into these areas and not, you know, really realize what they may be getting into. So I just really wanted to cover that on personal safety and workplace. And personal safety really begins with awareness. I mean, your head is on a swivel all the time out there when you're in the field after a disaster. I mean, normally it should be anyway, but it really is, or should be, in order to look for potential risk dangers to you, or being aware of your environment, because things happen fast. And then workplace safety, you know, that refers to the working environment that encompasses all the factors that impact health, safety, and well-being, including environmental hazards, but also working conditions, process. Oops, sorry, I have to move Terry out of my way here. Well, as well as potential risk by others. You know, I mean, you were sometimes going out into a place and working with a landowner who had just got off the phone with the bank or with the insurance company and found out what they didn't have or what they were covered. You know, I've been out personally on site visits where the landowner was drinking before I got up there. Not on this site, but just in general. I mean, those things happen, and you just need to be aware. And you're working with a group of people that may not be reacting or making decisions like they normally would because of those compounded stresses and that kind of thing. And you're just going to run into people that are having a bad day, and you just need to work with it. You can't take stuff personally. You have to be that sounding board and all of that kind of thing as you go along. So the PPE, if you haven't heard enough of PPE during COVID, we're going to cover it one more time for field. It's not going to be anything new, but we just want to cover it. You know, we all had our hard hats. We packed our rigs before we went with all the regular equipment, with the boots and the gloves, and high visibility vests, especially if you're wandering around in the woods at all, or you have come up, you're in the earlier in the situation with the fires or other disaster. There may be high traffic areas, big trucks coming in, equipment. You just want to make sure you're seen. If you're susceptible to respiratory issues, I mean, there was a lot of ash and dusty conditions and smoke and all of that kind of thing. Of course, eye protection, and again, hearing protection if you're around heavy equipment. any chainsaws, helicopters, anything that you might be running into when you're out in the field. And identifying rig signs or credentials. You know, I've been in situations where this was good or bad, being identified as a government employee. But there was often times where we went up behind gates in places where we were way the heck up in there. I'm sure, you know, in other situations you deal with looting and people accessing and being places where they weren't, that you should have your credentials and some kind of business card or a district work sign or your organization's sign if you have it. Of course, food and water. Every one of us was gone out longer than we expected during the day. Things run long. It's typical, not just your run out to the field and come back as you're gone for long extended periods of time. And of course, gear up and be ready. And, you know, there is, particularly with fires, there's some extra things that you should throw in the back. Like a shovel or a chainsaw. I mean, if you get into any kind of windy conditions, you want to be able to cut your way back out if trees start falling. And also a shovel. There were several times where we ended up stopping and putting fires out alongside of the road on the way to a site visit. You know, just a bucket or water or something like that. Ideally, you don't want to grab the commuter card that the boss takes for meetings to go out to these sites. You want to really strive to have a 4-wheel drive rig. The conditions just are rough out there. And if it rains really hard and it gets really super muddy and it's slick out there, chains could be also something, or if it's in the fall and you hit the snow. And Craig's crew, they did have the GPS units, the spot devices, the GPS satellite messenger for a safety aspect, just in case they got somewhere they didn't check in or they needed help or something like that. Just like an avalanche beacon, some of those kind of things to keep in mind. And then, in some instances, there are some trainings coming up with NRCS for your NRCS quad training. If there's times where you might need that, going and looking at acreages or doing some GPSing could be helpful. And always, we went in pairs where it was warranted unless we didn't think that there was a site. It was, wasn't way out beyond where you wouldn't feel safe going, or if it wasn't pretty localized or that kind of thing. But we did go in pairs a lot, and that was really helpful. One, because you didn't know the area and you had somebody to read the maps and have those other eyes for safety. And with radios and cell phones, important, but don't always work where you're going. So don't rely on your cell phone map GPS to get you where you need to go. I'm a paper map person. I still love my Thomas guides. And oftentimes the GPS, I always had paper maps to get where I was going, just because you ran amok oftentimes on some of the GPS off your phone. Of course, bug spray, but folks, if you're not used to ticks might be an issue depending where you end up. And I put tetanus booster down just as not something that you necessarily would consider, but I was really glad I had it as an update, because you are around a bunch of metal and old fence posts and wire and those kind of things that I was like, oh, I was really actually glad that I had got my tetanus booster like a month before I left. And so it never hurts, right? And then just some of those things that we really ran into, the old term, the watch out situations, is just really to be wary. And, when we got in the rig to go out in the morning, or we got to a site where we had to get out, we did have a quick safety chat on what we need to consider, where we're heading out, what are the things to look for, watch the weather, see if there's supposed to be any big wind events or other weather events. Hazard trees were a real issue. We were very cautious about staying away from any buildings or things with structural damage. You don't need to be in there. and just running risk of collapse. Wandering livestock, there was several times where you came around a corner and here's a cow or something else standing in the middle of the road that had lost his way and the fences had burned down, and that's something you just need to be aware of and watch your road speeds and that kind of thing, because you don't want to be hitting somebody's livestock out in the middle of nowhere with no cell phone service. And downed wires earlier on, consider downed wires, rattlesnakes. If you're not used to the east side, rattlesnakes can be a real issue on certain places where you're going. But then again, the erosion, the flash floods, the culvert washout, roads washout, something really, really, to consider before you head out and there's a storm coming, or you get up somewhere and something happens, or something to consider there. Again, the weather's really important. And then something that you generally wouldn't consider is these huge holes in the road that the burned roots create. When you're bombing down the road and next thing you know, there's a huge hole in the middle of the road because the tree burned and it burned all the way down to the roots. And, they're not only in the road, they're all over the place. But in particular, there were several times where we weren't sure if we're going to get around something because there was burned roots had burned out. And then congregated deer and elk and wildlife. This was just something as kind of a heads up on, especially if you're not from the area, not used to a lot of wildlife. But those available forage grounds that didn't burn are a great spot where deer and elk congregate. And there was a lot of times where they were coming down off the hills or elsewhere in the evenings when you were heading back to the office. And so something to just keep in mind. And then there is that landowner angst, right? And just being aware of that and knowing when to come back another day or just sit there and, let them go, let them vent for a while. Didn't happen very often, but it'll happen occasionally. These people are pushed to their limits, and like James said, is being prepared for that emotional toll. I wasn't there very long over in Okanagan, but just from the other fires and events and those kind of things, it's exhausting. And these poor people who it's their home district, just day after day after day. You just have to be prepared from the landowner side to deal with it, but also, just giving people grace that, they have been through a long haul and being prepared for that. Just something to think of. And this is just a list of resources. There's some great field safety on a OSHA wildfire response. The post wildfire recovery partnership had a great thing, and just worker safety. So that's all I'm going to leave it at for that. But it's always just, you can't just have enough about field safety. We want everybody to go out, do their work, and be able to get back into the office. So we don't need something else on top of an already tragic event. So that's that one. Oh, this was one I literally just, if you haven't seen the NRCS one, I literally Googled fire recovery NRCS and this popped up. This was a nice little handout. I'll post this to Okanagan's file drawer after we're done, and you can actually have a copy of it if you want.
Hey, Bobby, that we were so impressed with that handout, the NRCS one, and the contents it has. So you guys, class students, you really should go take a look at the things that are in the file drawer, because these are the folks that lived it. These are the folks that did the work. They're going to be finding you the best resources there possibly are in the field. So take a look at those and don't just say, oh yeah, it's in the file drawer, but just really, really do go check the stuff out in there, because it's going to be very helpful. Thank you, Bobby, and she's going to keep going.
All right. Did this one work? Can you see that?
Yes, we're good.
Okay. Okay, so the next one that I'm going to talk about is the SWAPA-E. Sorry, I'm just starting my timer here so I can get you guys out of here. And that's basically the animals and plants section of this on inventories, what to do and what to get there. And again, you've heard this before, and I can't just emphasize it again, but listening. You know, so many of the visits started out with listening first, hearing their stories. You know, they've told them 1,000 times, but they want to keep, you know, telling it again. And it's, I think it's also a way of them, you know, coming to grips with the situation and just listening to the landowners, jumping in the rig and running out to somebody's property. And can you still see that, Terry? You disappeared.
Yeah, Bobby, it could be that I'm going, but it looks like you've still got the other slide presentation up, the safety one.
Here, let's get rid of that. I'm sorry.
It's okay. I thought we were good, but I was incorrect. So
that's all right. We'll try it again. It's like it's the who's who of what platform we're going to use for the day. How's that?
I'm not seeing your presentation yet.
Here, let me stop sharing and reshare.
There you go. You got it.
Oh, and then you're back. So yeah, listening and hearing. First and foremost, they're going to tell you their story. Most of the time, they came out and they wanted to tell the story, where they were, things that were going on, and they're pretty all dang amazing to begin with. What they were going through, and then they kind of have their really unfocused, like Craig had said, and I guess Terry and James too, unfocused objectives and goals. There really may not be their immediate need. It's something that they're focused on for some reason or not. And so you have to kind of figure out how to get there and what the real issues are. Having some connection with them, not only, I don't want to say as a way of gaining credibility, but just providing that empathy. And, you know, I farm here in the Snoqualmie Valley in Duval, and I deal with anywhere from 3 to 6 floods a year. And it's just something that we deal with. And some might be small floods, and my fields might be 17 feet underwater. I'm literally in the bottom of the bathtub. You know, we've lost cows. We've lost all perimeter fences. All of our friends have lost their buildings, and it's a horrible event to go through. And you know, when one fire comes after the other and that kind of thing over time, it's just exhausting. I also did some work up on the Oso slide, which was a whole different ball game. But just all of these disaster issues that come up, you know, they all have a common theme of just really listening, trying to figure out what the real problems are at the time, what are the biggest things to solve, and how do you move forward best you can. Again, like I had said earlier, that these landowners may not be ready to make a decision. So don't jump out of the rig first and foremost and say, boy, do I have a program for you. I have a great thing I need you to sign up for, and this is going to be the answer to all your questions. Those are really came towards the end of, if at all, at the conversations, because there was so much more information to gather. You know, things that, you know, a lot of this funding and budget had to be formulated, and you know, we needed numbers and fence lines and all of that kind of thing. And so really trying to pick and choose something that worked best for them as a prescription was very difficult that first day out. And it wasn't always something that you were going to be able to do. Again, taking maps with you, if there's any way that you could get a hold of, if it's a landowner the district or somebody has worked with, this won't be as easy, of course, with other entities, but if there is already a farm plan, It's nice to try at least see what it looked like before, or what were the prescriptions before, what were those BMPs that they had installed, and where were they. Aerial photos that you can like sit down over the bed of the pickup and talk to the landowner or rancher, and he can pencil in, this is where this stuff was, and those kind of things. Plant ID books, if you're not from that area, super helpful, especially with weeds. You know, weeds were a pretty big concern and issue. I thankfully, I guess I say that, in that by the time I got there, late August-ish, early fall, there had already been some moisture and things were starting to green up, and there was a lot more hope, I'm sure, than the first months after the fire. But the weeds were really coming up, and those were some of the things that were really key to grab onto. Taking a camera and documenting is just imperative, between the before and afters and damage and all of those kind of things. If it was on a rangeland, I always talk to the landowner about what were they doing out there. Do you know what your prior tons the acre were? Do you know what your stalking rate generally was? Taking a look at the burn severity and the slopes and the landscapes. Erosion, out of most of them, erosion, it came down to an erosion and safety issue. It wasn't really about prescription, again, because it was going to take time to get to where we needed to be. Documenting feed losses, crop losses, all those kinds of things, the livestock, you know, all the troughs, tanks, spring developments, irrigation, fencing, all of those things, because what needs to happen is all of this information gets to be compiled up into a database and an ask list, so if you will, on what really the needs are. And then, of course, same with the barns and buildings and out the outbuildings. But really, one of the key things was, when I went out there, what people really wanted was, I know maybe they've had somebody out there before, maybe it wasn't the conservation district, but they really want to be reassured, and they want people to tell them, what is my immediate risk? What is this slope behind my house going to hold? What is the risk of the blowouts, you know, mudslides, failures, all of that kind of thing. And then I always left them with something, you know, like James said, leaving them with a little piece of hope, whether it's a business card, a plan to follow up, what the next steps are. All of those kind of things, networks to make sure that they're engaged, so they are on these lists, and organizations where hopefully funding is going to be coming down, so people, they are identified and people can find them when things need to happen. So as far as the plant section, you know, it was, like James said, you know, a lot of the rangeland was coming back. I mean, there was definitely moonscapes, and there was definitely areas that were hit amazingly hard. But it was nice to pop out there and see a nice little aspen grove starting to pop up, right? And that things were going to be happening. But what you do when you're as a farm planner and you're going out, you're filling into your inventory, and you're trying to figure out, hey, you know, generally what tools do I run for a pasture or a range condition or those kind of things. You can't, because there's literally nothing out there to really gather. Most of it was burned up. So what you're generally doing for your technical assistance and your site visits is really assessing what's going on, assessing what's happened or potentially what's going to happen, assessing immediate needs and risks, really taking a look at the weeds issue when it comes to plants. And there may be some tools that you could still use, but a lot of them, you know, they just weren't something that we really used immediately post fire. You know, I imagine you could go back and you know, gather some good information. But really, I mean, when you're out there standing with a guy and he's asking you, when can I bring my cows back on? I mean, there's a lot more to it for that. You could do it inventories based on area burned, degree burned, and area burned, and that kind of thing. And hopefully maybe have some information of pre-fire conditions, especially if it was some kind of range or allotment, or he's worked with the district before. It's good to document even the riparian vegetation, again, the degree of burn. And, you know, again, it was all about the erosion, the hazards, the weeds, how things were going to come back. But then I was always looking for signs of life to point out to the landowner. And, you know, did have a conversation that, you know what, rangeland burning is a tool that we can use to increase productivity. I mean, ideally, you don't want it racing through your farm, the entire forest, but you know, encourage them that, you know, the most of the grasslands were going to come back. And then we talked about the plant pressures, was really looking at what are the potential risks out there in terms of the weeds. In particular, we had a lot of Dalmatian toadflax popping up on a lot of the burn sites, and that was, you know, enjoying itself out there all alone, and, you know, doing seemingly well, because the other things haven't come back yet. But you know, maybe that's an opportune time where you find a cluster like that where you could do some spot spraying or something like that for control. And then work closely with your noxious weed board. You know, Terry and I were having a conversation about just the breadth and depth of just the weed impacts, and how do you accomplish that, and should you know, what can be done? I mean, do you want to do a bunch of aerial seeding where maybe you're going to outcompete with the native plants or grasses that will come back just fine? But are those areas, you know, most of the seeding seem to be related to risk and bare soil and slopes and that kind of thing. Or, you know, if there was some weed infestations where you could possibly go in and hand treat, or, you know, these guys worked with the weed board and they ended up with some funds, and there was a backpack crew going around and doing some spraying and management that way. But really monitoring and record keeping before and after photos, really kind of documenting over time what's going to happen and where this is all moving forward. There's a great deal of information to be gathered after that first batch of rainfall to spring on what's going to be truly going on out there. But with the landowner, I mean, just really setting realistic production and conservation goals, and, you know, selecting things based on the site suitability and the climate and the topography and are really important. Species selection, if that's what you want to do, is really important. But it's really difficult seeding on burned soils, you know, and not have it all end up on the bottom if you can't do a good, you know, seed preparation or a seed bed, and you do a bunch of seeding and then have a rain event afterwards and it all washes to the bottom, or it washes off of what the intended purpose was. You know, it's just some of those things to take in mind. But again, more picture taking, and, you know, as all of us have seen over time, that nature is a pretty dang good at recovering over time, but it takes time to get there. And it's just reassuring the landowners on the recovery, addressing the needs, hoping to avoid some really big pitfalls with some of the things that will occur and could occur after the rain events happen, are just really things to think about. Because again, soil stabilization was almost all of them the primary goal. We did a lot of recommendations of trees that were falling down, dead trees standing, trees up against the slope, try to slow some things down, and really link in with the bear team and what areas of focus that they're working on, and they have, where are their priority areas, and what are some of their recommendations. They've been out doing a lot of work before we got there on all the GIS mapping and all of a lot of important things that were already going into play. And then identify the issues on some of these parts and take them back to the office and said, hey, I really think this might be a red flag I think I really need another set of eyes on this. I'm concerned about this situation out there, but I don't know how to fix it. Take it back to the office and ask for more help for it. There is nothing wrong with telling a landowner, I do not know how to address this issue, but let me go back. We thankfully were able to drag one of our engineers over with us when we were out there, and they were imperative to have on site on some of these site visits, who's also specialized in, surface waters and runoff and those kind of things, and had a really good eye for potential situations. And so it was really super helpful to have some of those folks on the team for that. And then as far as the livestock, I just, this picture on the right hand side with the cattle before and after is pretty indicative of what we saw after, and what I'm sure a lot of you all saw after. But generally, when we were trying to go out there and do work from the livestock side of things, I don't think I went on a site visit that had livestock on it. They were gone, they were burned, they were hauled out. They generally weren't on site, at least with the places that I had gone out to. I know there were places with them out there, but they were generally not on site. But more documentation, understanding livestock losses could be large. I know people that lost their whole herds burnt up in allotments or on grazing. The infrastructure, until you can get the infrastructure taken care of, the fences back up, the water lines fixed, the irrigation or pump systems, all of that kind of thing fixed and patched up, and wait for recovery, it was going to be a while before livestock were going to be addressed back on the farm plan side of things, excuse me. And I kind of tossed this in here, this off-district opportunity and this is something that the districts can't really work with, but we are well networked, and a lot of us are Farm Bureau members or cattlemen members, and both with OSO and with the Eastern Washington fires, we rallied our folks over here for feed donations and fencing supplies and that kind of thing, and it was just one extra thing that people could do for their fellow community member. And so that was something that I also was able to use my personal links in to help coordinate and do other efforts that outside of work, but it was just one additional thing that we did. And the other thing is out here, like James alluded to, is not only had landowners not formulated a plan, they obviously, and it would make sense that they didn't know what plan they were supposed to formulate. They couldn't figure out what the priorities were. What are they going to do if they had animals to put back out there? Where would they go? Would they go to another range area like James' friend? Would they just toss in the towel? Would they, buy more cows later on? They hadn't even got that far, but focusing on those improvements to make first. There was a lot of fencing crews that had been out already early on by the time I got there to get the fences up, to get these guys, their perimeters back, and things kind of fell into place from there. And these guys knew that, the funding was going to take time. It was going to trickle down. They would get there, but there just wasn't really good answers to be had immediately. And then also the animal inventory isn't just about the livestock. It's also is about the terrestrial and aquatic too. So I always made sure you make sure to take a look at that. And that's also pulling in the culvert risks and immediate needs, risks of washouts. A lot of these places were at the bottom of a draw where the buildings or the houses were. What level of burn did the riparian habitat have? And the issues with the wildlife, again, the congregation issues, the poor guy that his whole alfalfa field thankfully didn't burn up because he was able to turn the irrigation on, now has more deer in it, eating it up than he could possibly imagine, and because there's nothing else around, and so he's trying to figure out a plan for that. Starvation with wildlife is certainly a real issue. Again, the threats to the hay and the forage, and threats to people. It's just not safe to feed wildlife, and that's also something that we ended up. Terry and I had a conversation about of people wanting to feed the wildlife and wanted money or wanted to buy hay or grain and feeling sorry for the wildlife, which is really great and nice, but it's never a good idea to do that. And so we were, it's one thing to educate people on the reasoning behind that and leave it to Fish and Wildlife and their feeding stations and some of those kind of things. And wildlife, warning people they're going to wander, look for food where they can find it. And some people did want to talk about wildlife management and potential, for the next spring, and pile up your brush, make a brush pile, or put up nest boxes. But really, these two were clearly not the top of anybody's mind for the most part. They had much bigger things to go on. So seeding, seed where applicable, and where you can make a seed bed available. It honestly was not one of the top recommendations that we were meeting out there, because there was just the ability for much of the grass to come back. And again, the seeding measures that were being recommended were usually identified with some kind of risk, whether it be slope or erosion or weed pressure. Most of, I think I even read an article of 70–80% of bunch grasses will do pretty good in a general fire and come back. It certainly, it was really surprising, actually, for as hot as things burn, to see the amount of vegetation popping through the little moonscape at the base of some of these plants. And with the landowner, obviously they're going to have to provide other feed wherever that may be if he wants to keep his animals. But as that plan comes together again, you're going to have to take a look at your stocking rates and make adjustments. And, it could take a number of years, of course, for the rangelands to recover. It's going to be potential for increased productivity, especially where sagebrush had come in and taken over to open up some more ground for grass. But mostly rebuilding fences was a priority for these guys, and the watering and irrigation, erosion control, but just really trying to get things back in order before they even thought about what to do with the livestock side of things. There really wasn't a lot on the animal planning side like we generally do with waste calcs and that kind of thing, forage production, trying to figure out a nutrient management balance, because there just wasn't anything left, and that we needed the time to have things recover before we could really get that. And I think one thing about talking to somebody about encouraging that recovery is happening, but is important, but be realistic, with landowners, especially related to, don't give them a magic number on when they'll be able to use their property or when their parcels or where their land is going to recover, and plan for rehabilitation along the way. There's going to be areas that burn super hot that is going to need some help, and maybe gets fenced out separately than some of the other areas that could be grazed sooner, some of those kind of things. But create a schedule of priorities with them that fits their goals, so they have something in place to follow, rather than them trying to figure out the soup to nuts of what all has to happen. Create a plan of priorities by importance, one from a safety standpoint on down to, working with them on what really they want to get back as well. And more importantly, get them in the system to have them be able to access all the opportunities that warrant them, whether it's Farm Service Agency, NRCS, any FEMA, all of that kind of stuff. Just make sure that they're all in the system and document all the needs so you can take it back, so everybody can put it in their big master ask list of the need, the feet of fencing, the miles of pipeline, all of that kind of thing. And then, ask them if they have other options for other ground for their animals. Do they have alternative farming areas that they can focus on? Do they have any other land that they could potentially either haul over to, or are they focusing on maybe another market outside of livestock, that maybe they can focus on that a little harder than what they're able to do with any livestock until things recover. Are there other opportunities for improvement on other ground? And as you work with them, did they have things that, you know, they had planned to do that they didn't maybe get to, that are now additional opportunities for BMP implementation that even helps them out even further as far as or additional opportunities? And then I did just a blurb of kind of the common practices that, you know, the soup to nuts of at any one point in the day, we were talking about one of these or many of these or all of these on site with the landowner of things that they're going to have to consider implementing to get back on their feet and back up and running, all of which are NRCS practices. So I guess the bottom line in it all is take your time you need with the landowner. Again, all of them wanted you out there to evaluate their risk. Don't rush to make things happen. Let recovery happen the way it's going to happen. Perennial grasses will most often recover. The inventory, again, focus on immediate needs and even the little wins. Like James, I think, was talking about, you know, just providing that hope to people. And those little wins oftentimes were walking them over to a sagebrush plant or a bitter brush or that aspen grove and showing them, look, I bet this wasn't here. And they were, you know, having people see that things were coming back. And identifying the plants was really important too, because many people thought a lot of it was weeds. And showing them what they had growing back there was really helpful to them. Linking them up with the other agencies, super important. Get them into the systems, ideally now instead of later. If they're not in the FSA center in the systems, they should be. And then coordinate with others, follow their recommendations if they've come and developed those, and really identify the positives of a horrible situation. Again, here's the same little resource guide. And that's kind of it for the plants and animals piece for this round.
That's awesome. Thank you, Bobby. I knew Bobby would do an awesome job on that particular topic. She was very skilled at going out on the sites and evaluating. Besides the fact that she had that broad experience beforehand that she could then apply to the new situation, that's basically the theme of this whole presentation, is that you've already got skills, right? You've already got observational skills, you've already got skills in planning, you've already got skills in finding funding for particular things that the landowner and you have decided this is what you want to have happen. You've got skills in those areas. We're just applying them in a really random and weird kind of situation. So take heart that when something like this happens, or when some kind of disaster or large-scale event happens, you've got some things to work with. It may feel at first like you don't know what to do, that you don't know what you might be able to do, you don't know what might be able to be applied to it, but those resources and those skills and abilities, if you don't already have them, you're going to develop them. And just have some faith in yourself about doing that work. That even if you make mistakes at the beginning, it'll get better. That you'll learn from those mistakes and you'll get better. So we do want to take quite a bit of time here. We're going to actually use the rest of the time here to kind of review and wrap up. And I'd actually like the students to, you can raise your hand, maybe tell us something, a takeaway that you particularly liked, or something that you particularly resonated with as far as the presentations today, something new that you learned. We're going to take about a half an hour to go ahead and discuss those. And if anybody has any questions, just go right ahead. You can raise your hand on the little bar at the bottom. I'd actually rather hear your voice than have you chat in the chat box. Though the chat box is okay, I would really rather have your face and your actual question in front of us. Anyone? Anyone want to start? Everyone's suddenly shy, or they all went to sleep.
Put them all to sleep.
I'll ask a question, Terry. I have a question for Craig. And so there's a couple of us on this call that worked in Oregon this summer. Kelsey Madsen from FEMA and I got to know each other real well doing the work in Oregon like we did in 2014 and 15. And what we didn't have was a Craig Nelson. So it was really, you know, like, right? It was like what Amy Hendershot came to you with and said, this is a problem, be ready. But it was us coming to the locals saying, this is a problem, be ready, you know, we can bring these resources. And so here's the federal government descending rather than that local connection. And I don't feel like we really ever fully bridged that gap. So I don't, just food for thought. I don't know what you think about that. I definitely felt the loss of that local, whatever you want to call yourself. I'll let you I'll let you do that.
So, you know, I've thought about this a lot, you know, and I know that there are other people around that would do much the same thing that I did. But I've thought back to that meeting that, you know, Terry was at, along with others, you know, that Monday after, and I don't know that I would have done it if there had been different people around me. I don't know that I would have done it if my family hadn't suffered a direct loss because of this. I was frankly pissed. Sorry for the language, but I was just mad. I was really mad that this had occurred. And I wanted to do something about it. I wanted to do something positive. So, yeah, it is really, it's really highly variable. You know, Mike Baden, he can talk about, you know, what's other, you know, districts, you know, they almost all districts have the same capabilities that we have, you know, and there are other organizations too that have the same types of capabilities. It's a matter of what personalities are at the table at that moment. And that's, there's, I don't know how to answer that. You know, how do you prep for that? How do you get somebody in the right spot at the right time? I don't know. You know, I saw it as we can do something positive. We can try to make something positive out of this horrible situation, and try to do something to help our community and recognize that we are a service organization above all else. We provide a very specific kind of service. So let's go do that. And the other 5 were just crazy enough to follow along. And here we are. So I wish I could tell you how to teach that to somebody. But I think people have to be in a spot in their life that they're willing to take that on. So that's the best I got.
I appreciate that answer, Craig. And I would say I've been asked by people doing research, like, what's that magic thing that makes these work? And I'm like, I don't think you can cookie cutter it or a recipe book, because, you know, not every state has a Craig or an Annie Schmidt or everybody just that happens to be there in the right place at the right time. So that kind of confirms what I already felt. Thanks.
I do have one thing to say about that, though. And that is one of the reasons that we felt it important to do this training was because I feel like, yes, you do need to have the right team. And yes, it helps immensely to have someone that's in charge that respects their team members and understands their capabilities well enough to get them going. But I feel like that if you have one person on a team that's willing to cheerlead and lead in a direction, that oftentimes other people will follow. They may not think that they have the capability to do it, but if one person on that team can recognize and encourage the others in that team to realize who they are and what skills they already have and how they can help, I'm hoping that this training makes a whole pile of you, frankly, partly because that was what we had and we knew it was special. We knew it was something that was not going to happen very, very frequently. And we wanted that experience to spread. And we wanted that understanding that people could do something and be creative and solve problems and do work that was impossibly hard. We all survived and we came out and we did something that we're proud of. That can actually happen in those circumstances when oftentimes it feels like there's no way out. And so I think if we have this little cadre of people that in our state and around, and I was training people from Idaho that were on fire. I had somebody call me at one point and say, I want to learn how to do this. I talked my board into letting me come because I knew that we were going to face this and you guys were the ones that I needed to learn it from. And so I took her out for a couple days and we did site assessments and we talked about what that looks like. And I wasn't able to give her a full training on it, but she knew it was important enough. And that one person in that district was going to make a difference for that district. So I hope all of you will kind of take up the flag and run with it and go for it and encourage those around you, because oftentimes as human beings, we kind of feel like who am I? Who am I to do this? But all it takes is picking up the flag and walking a few steps and encouraging other people to take a few steps. So I'd actually like Mike, if you have a comment on that question.
Well, I think Craig did a good job. I think, I think that local connection is really important. I see a lot of names on this list here, and I think, without a doubt, many of you that have, many of at least the conservation district folks I work with have really done a great job of stepping up in one way or another and leading at their local level. I think that local connection is really important. But what I'm hoping in this training that folks can gather is, one of the things I think a lot of you have done well, but Craig and Okanagan did well, is connecting with those other resources that are out there and bringing it all together and learning who those people were and how to connect with the folks like Catherine and other people. I hope that's something that folks get out of this, because I think it'll help you be more focused, more confident, maybe as you go out, because I know there's always hesitation to go out and what are we getting into, but I think at least for our district folks, we have a great group of district that really want to help their landowner when these kinds of things happen. And I think learning from each other, learning just what resources are out there, what connections there are, who people are, and that kind of stuff, where to go for help and assistance and such is going to be, a good thing. And hopefully that spreads through our group here in our state and hopefully, we can be an example to other states like Catherine said. So I don't know if that helps or not, or if that's kind of what you were looking for, Terry or Craig, but I think we can all learn a lot from each other and the experiences that are out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Mike. Yeah, that communication and interconnection is huge, just huge in all of this. So Annie, I believe you had your hand up earlier. Would you like to ask a question or comment?
I was just going to comment that I think this conversation is really all about like local capacity and recognizing the need to build truly local capacity in places ahead of incidents, right? I mean, we are talking about this post-fire component, but a lot of the enabling conditions that really helped, I think, Okanagan to be able to respond in the way that they were existed prior to the incident, right? And so the leadership that existed to sort of build the capacity that provided the technical expertise and then the will to sort of dig into this issue all existed prior to the fire. And it's really hard to put those things together after an incident when you're under a fair amount of stress and your human capacity is significantly dented. And so like I would just, you know, and I definitely think leaders' intent is a big part of this, but I also think that like we have to recognize in a lot of these disasters, we see our human capacity significantly impacted where, you know, the mayor's house burns down, the police chief's house burns down, the fire chief's house burns down. You know, I mean, like it's not quite so clear cut to where we as service providers are completely removed from the disaster. In many of these cases, we're also like living it at the same time. So there's my plug for building the capacity ahead of time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I hope that all of you kind of get this message of, you know, preparation is important.
Right.
Go ahead.
I want to add to what Annie was just saying and just say that, you know, in 14 and 15, you know, we had, you know, NRCS are very close partners and we lean on them heavily for a lot of stuff. And you know, we had multiple staff from their office that were out with level 2 and level 3 evacuations, which, you know, if you don't know, level 2 means get ready to be out in the next 5 minutes. Level 3 is get out now. You know, and you know, my mom lost her house in 14. In the middle of getting ready to go to my first meeting with FEMA on the potential for post-wildfire, you know, disaster stuff, I get the phone call that my dad passed away. You know, there are things that will happen that will throw a wrench. Anything that could possibly go wrong will go wrong. You will be stupefied by the amount of just what would normally be somewhat inconsequential stuff get thrown at you, and it gets thrown at you. So having as you said, Terry, having a cadre of people around, you know, and as Annie was saying, you know, build up that preparedness, that ability and the capability ahead of time so that you're not making the phone calls 3 days after the fire to Annie going, okay, what do I do now? I mean, you know, Annie's great and she's happy to help with all that stuff. And I'm happy to do that. Or, you know, meeting Catherine for the first time and finding out, you know, what do you mean I'm in a shadow of radar coverage? I don't even know what that means, you know, and trying to learn all this stuff in the midst of all of it, you know, yeah, that's why we're trying to do this, is increase some capacity and some foresight of, you know, get people thinking about how do I do this going forward? You know, when my time comes, and it may not be fire, it could be flood, it could be a severe windstorm, you know, it could be all sorts of things. So, yeah.
Great. So James, I'm going to get to you in a second, but Dave, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that this is so incredibly timely. I mean, we went through, you know, the same Labor Day fires in Ferry County last year. And not nearly to the size. And Craig was a great resource for me, but you know, I felt like I didn't do a very good job in the long run because I didn't know a lot of this stuff. And so yesterday I gave my monthly download to the county commissioners, and actually it was I had a different presentation. All ready to go on water quality. But I wound up using the last 10 minutes, you know, talking about, you know, the classes I took last week, you know, and this coming up, you know, and saying, you know, based on my experience last year of not, you know, I felt like I really didn't meet the needs of the people I was reaching out to, you know, mostly because I didn't have the capacity. You know, it is just so important to build that, you know, particularly in a small county where there aren't a lot of resources. And I said, we got to start. I said, you know, when I'm here next month, I said, you know, I'm going to start talking about fire, you know, and how we can kind of pull everything together. So I hope to, you know, it was great today. You know, I really appreciate what James said because, you know, being kind of on my own, going down and looking at, you know, what happened, it's hard. And you know, in 18, you know, I went through it, you know, personally with the Boyd's fire. And it was black right up to my back door, but I wasn't one of the people that lost their house. So yeah, this is really timely and I really appreciate it. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave. James, go ahead.
Okay. About this, one thing I think we should not discount in the district world is Washington's uniqueness. And we are truly unique here in the culture within the conservation districts. You know, other states are set up differently. And, you know, I mean, I've dealt with Oregon's conservation districts some, and they have a different culture there. They're more of a agency based, you know, and when somebody says you can't do that, the tendency is to say, okay, you know. In Washington, somebody says you can't do that, we say, watch me.
Yeah.
You know, it's different, and we need to be able to export that as well if we can.
Challenge accepted, James. Challenge accepted.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, we're all a little rebellious, I guess. we don't take no for an answer easily as a crowd, and I think that was one of the qualities that we had in Okanagan Conservation District was we were not willing to say no. So we were not willing to take that for an answer. Are there any other questions? Dan, go ahead, Dan. Dan Downs, I see your hand up. Do you have a question?
I didn't necessarily have a question. There was one item that I hadn't heard mentioned. I have about 37 years experience with fire service, and actually a little more than that because I work with the Washington State Cattlemen's Association as a regional support service individual. But one of the things with the fire service, and as a conservation district employee also, or not employee, but supervisor, if the conservation district is acknowledged as the lead agency, you might say, for the post-fire assessments, one thing they're going to have to deal with is the media. And they need to be prepared to deal with that. As working with the fire service for many years, I found that in command of large fires and such, the media can, while it's necessary for the people to know, I guess, what's going on, they can be almost a hindrance in achieving your goals. So I like to see this training also, because for a conservation district to be prepared, training such as this, and then maybe drafting an outline plan for what they will do. You can't put down a lot of particulars, but you can definitely draft an outline to work off of. And when you're prepared that way and then have some of the training, things should go a lot smoother and easier. And a lot of times, just very quickly, down in this southern area of the state, you might say, it's dry also. We have a lot of fair-sized fires, big fires down here. A lot of them happen to be with federal lands, coming off of the firing center, coming off of the Hanford Reservation, and such as that. And so that adds another little twist in the post-fire assessment and working and dealing with that, because then you start working with the government agencies, federal government agencies, and also some of the tribal agencies get involved in a lot of that down here. So those are some of the things that are nice to have in your basic plan, I guess.
Excellent comment. Thank you, Dan. That's a brilliant piece of information there. Yeah, definitely. I would just look around and see who all and talk to them ahead of time and definitely build those resources on that district level as well. I think too, we have this team of employees, but we also have this great team of supervisors with connections throughout the county. And that was a huge piece too, that our supervisors were on the ball, that they were with it, they were enthusiastic about helping, and they supported us in all the stuff that we did. So that's another big, humongous piece as well. That's great. Okay, I did want to give Mike just a few minutes to talk about upcoming other trainings, and then we'll close for the evening. Thank you so much. It's been a joy being with you and meeting you all, and thank you all for coming.
Thanks, Terry. Yeah, just real quick, and again, thanks to everyone for coming today. Look forward to spending the next few days with you as well. Just thought I'd just lay out just a little bit about kind of the background for this. We did receive a FEMA grant to put on several trainings. I think after the 2018 fires or something like that, and we're finally able to put this together after a long road of getting things prepped, and then COVID hitting us and all that good stuff. But so we had a chance to again work with Okanagan to put on this post-fire assessment training. We have also had a slate of what they call assessing structure ignition potential trainings. Those are taught. We're working with the National Fire Protection Association to teach those. Basically, your home ignition zone assessment type trainings. We've had a couple of those so far. I think we have 7 total scheduled throughout the life of this grant. We've been able to put on a couple. We put on one. We've kind of roughly set them up geographically focused for attendees. I think we had one that was focused on the north central area, and a few of you were able to join us for that. We held one recently that was focused on the northwest area of the state, and a few of you might have joined that one as well. We've got one upcoming beginning of May that's focused on the northeast area of the state, roughly, and I think that one's about full, which is great. And another one, I think the second week of May, kind of again back to the north central part of the state, but there is some room in that. In case you're kind of located in that area and want to join, feel free to reach out to me. I can tell you how to get a hold of the Cascadia Conservation District, who's helping to take registrations for that training and such. But I think we've got some room in that one as well if folks want to participate in the home ignition zone training. It's kind of set up for professionals that might be doing those types of assessments out in the field to kind of learn more about it. It's a 4-day kind of half day over 4-day type training. Been really good. But feel free to reach out to me if you want to, if you're kind of interested and want to learn more about that. We'll have some trainings focused on the southwest, southeast, and south central areas coming up this fall. Kind of the dates are to be determined. So if you're in those kind of parts of the state, be on the lookout for that as well. But that's that. And we also have another training that we just held last week, focused on community outreach around fire resilience and fire recovery, more to the public information officers type of work. And a few of you were able to join that. We'll have another one of those kind of identical training to that in the fall as well. Again, date to kind of be determined. But if you're interested in those kinds of trainings, we'll have those. Happy to have you join us for those. If we have room and you're able to join us, that would be great. Just wanted to give a plug for those other trainings that are coming up as well. But again, more focused on kind of the professional folks that'll be out doing that kind of work. But we've had great feedback from the trainings we put on so far, and hopefully, no doubt, you learn a lot from this one as well. And again, thanks to the district, to Terry, Craig, and all the speakers for putting this thing together, because I think it's great value. So, thanks, Terry.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it. All right, guys, you're free. We'll meet back here at promptly 2 o'clock tomorrow. And please have your chosen persona with you when you come back. Ponder that overnight and figure out who you want to be in a fire scenario. We'll talk to you later.
Thanks, Terry.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.